بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear viewers, welcome to another live podcast here on YouTube. Today's topic is a very important topic as it's been developing over the last couple of weeks with feedback and questions. And with me today is Ustadh Muhammad Ali of Bradford Muslim College from Bradford. Assalamu alaikum, Ustadh. How are you?
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Shaykh, alhamdulillah, I'm well. Jazakallah, how are you?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, it's a good times. Just, as we were talking about earlier, classes online, one class to another. How's your week been and how is this topic developing for you? What's the response
Alhamdulillah,
been?
it's been it's going well. This is a topic that was chosen by the people.
Yes.
It was chosen and then voted for. So it was put forward and then voted for as well. And then there's been a lot of questions come forward with regards to this topic. People asking questions and kind of wanting misconceptions clarifying. So it's been it's a good topic. It's an interesting topic, and inshallah we hope to by the permission of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shed some light on that today, inshallah.
Yeah, alhamdulillah. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to everyone else for joining us today on this very, very important topic. I myself, with the reading I've been doing and the kind of questions I've been receiving, have come to realize how big a topic this is. But I actually want to start off by saying something which might not be to everyone's liking or even yours, Ustaz. And I said this to a couple of students during the week. I don't want to talk about this topic. I feel like we shouldn't be talking about this topic. It's bread and butter that we need to follow scholars. We need to follow the best of scholars. Because how else would we understand the Deen and the Quran, the Sunnah? And it's just, that's it. But unfortunately, Ustaz, and this is why we are here today, there's a whole movement and books being printed and Muslims and our great scholars being accused of innovations and misguidance, even accused of shirk. This is how bad this whole topic has got, that somebody is being accused of shirk. Muslims are being accused of polytheism because they follow a madhab or a scholar, and it's ridiculous. I'm just saying this at the beginning. This has become quite out of hand from my research, and it's really upsetting, to be honest, that Muslims have got the time to do this, and they've gone in and kind of broken the ranks of the Muslims and caused more division. And then I think to myself, well, isn't the response going to do more damage than good and so forth? But then reading into what the scholars have said, it's required, and it's not something that we want to do, but it's something we have to do. So it's almost like today the topic that's been picked by the people, I think, is more or less a wajib and a requirement for us to discuss for everyone's benefit.
Basically, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ba'd, fa'a'udhu billahi min shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Okay, the first thing with regards to this topic is that we start off with a very clear point, which is that our source of knowledge, our source of guidance, our source of evidence as Muslims and believers is the Quran and Sunnah. That's categorical. That is what we follow. We follow the Quran and the Sunnah. The issue then is that the question is, does everybody have the ability to access the knowledge in the Quran and Sunnah directly, every part with regards to everything? That's the question. So does everyone have accessibility? And every single listener, those who are listening now and those who will listen later, can ask themselves the question that, okay, we're Muslims, we follow the Quran and Sunnah. Do I have the skills and the ability to access the information in the Quran and Sunnah? Or do I need to go through someone to be able to access that information? So that's the first thing, the starting point. If you were to say then that, okay, we always look to the Quran and Sunnah for all our guidance. Now, whilst kind of researching this topic and looking into the various points of discussion, when I left work to study, I made a promise to myself, which was to look at everything from an open-minded point of view. And I'm willing to, we're Hanafi, we are from the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, but I'm open to listen to what everyone's got to say and whatever argument anybody's got to make and put forward. So I'm open to all the discussions and willing to kind of scrutinize and analyze them. Now, the thing is, I've come to an understanding, which I'm going to put forward to yourself and the listeners as well, is that taqleed is haram. Okay, so taqleed, what we refer to as blind following, is haram. Taqleed. So what we're talking about here is blind following. Yeah, and people hear this all the time, and there are brothers out there and sisters who go around actively promoting this message, saying taqleed is haram, and it may come as a surprise to some people, but I actually agree with them that taqleed is haram,
Ustaz,
it's
are you
impermissible.
changing your opinions? What's going on?
Let me explain.
Taqleed, which is blind following, is haram.
It is haram.
Bismillah, go explain, please.
You're not allowed to blind follow, and I will explain this in light of a Quranic verse in Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is Surah number 4, verse 100 and Surah number 5, verse 104. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the meaning of which is, and when it is said to them, come to what Allah has revealed and to the messenger. Now, as I mentioned, didn't I, the Quran and Sunnah, Allah and His Messenger is our primary source. So when it is said to them, come to Allah, what Allah has revealed, and to His Messenger, they say, sufficient for us is that upon which we found our fathers. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, even though their fathers knew nothing, nor were they guided. So here is clear that blind following others is impermissible, and it is haram to follow others, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that you should not be following others, you should be following the Quran and the Sunnah.
Allah and His Messenger.
Allah and His Messenger, not following individuals. So this is in the verse in the Quran, and this is basically talking about now a technical term, what we call taqleed haqiqi, actual and proper taqleed. The thing here to clarify is that this, first of all, is with regards to Aqidah. And the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the people who follow the four madhabs, the Hanafi, Shafi'i, Maliki, and Hanbali madhabs, they do not do taqleed when it comes to Aqidah and beliefs.
Okay, so what you're saying, Ustaz, is this ayah you just quoted is referring to following others in beliefs.
It's following others in beliefs. I just want to say
to our viewers, in Ramadan, I think it was in Ramadan or just before Ramadan, I did a course on Muqaddimat of Imam Sanusi, which are like preliminary discussions to Aqidah. He mentions what's a sabab, what's a qudra, irada. He goes through some terminologies. One of the things he mentions are the 6 reasons for shirk. The 6 reasons for shirk. And he says in there that one of the reasons for shirk is at-taqleed ar-radi. Taqleed, which is blind following, and he calls it ar-radi, this low, base, wrong type of taqleed. And he quotes this ayah in the commentaries. This ayah is quoted that what people used to do in their beliefs, which led them to shirk, was followed their forefathers, whatever they were on, and that took them away from Tawheed, from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the sayings and the teachings of His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But then he said there's also taqleed hasan, taqleed which is mahmud, praiseworthy. And then this is not in the Aqidah, this is in what you're saying right now, Ustaz. This is in our secondary issues, as they call them, the practices of faith, not the tenets or the beliefs.
Yes.
Practices are different to the doctrine. Over to you, Ustaz.
100%. So even here, the thing is that with regards to the beliefs, the other thing here is that the people who they used to follow, i.e. their forefathers, their following was baseless, because what's prohibited and haram is to follow somebody where there is no dalil. There is no proof, there is no evidence. So there's 2 things that we can extrapolate from this particular ayah. One is the fact that we don't follow and do taqleed in terms of aqidah. And the second thing is that we do not do taqleed when the taqleed is based on absence of knowledge and misguidance. So even if, for example, there is a fiqhi issue, and you cannot do taqleed of somebody in a fiqhi issue if there is no basis for it and there is no proofs and evidences for it at all. Okay, so this is our starting point in the sense of this is taqleed haqiqi, this is actual
Yeah.
taqleed, and this is mentioned in the Quran, and this is haram, and we acknowledge that, and it's an absolute disgrace if a Muslim puts other Muslims in this category of those who are mentioned in this
Yeah.
particular verse of the Quran. So to use this against other Muslims and say, right, look, you
Yeah.
Muslim, Hanafis, Maliki, Shafi'is, look what you're doing, you're blind following, and blind following is prohibited. Blind following, first of all, in Aqidah is prohibited, and secondly, blind following when there is no proof, that is what is prohibited. Yeah. So
Yeah.
then
So,
we
Ustaz,
come.
at this point, I want to quote a scholar that some of the people who don't follow a school of thought or follow a particular school of thought, they attack the four imams, or they disrespect them, or they say you give them too much importance. His name's Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, and he is a great scholar. He was full of knowledge. He had his books. He's got a book called I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in, which is a book on fiqh, qawaid al-fiqh, usul fiqh. And in this book, he talks about this very concept. So if you give me 2 minutes, I'm just going to read a translation of what he says in I'lam al-Muwaqqi'in. So he says, if it is said, only he who followed the disbelievers and his ignorant and misguided forefathers was condemned. So if it is said, he who followed the disbelievers and his ignorant and misguided forefathers was condemned, as you've shown in the ayah, whereas he who followed the rightly guided scholars was not condemned. We should remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders to ask the people of the reminder, who are the knowledgeable scholars, and this is to follow them. Yuqalliduhum, he uses the word taqleed, to follow them, the rightly guided scholars. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ask the people of the reminder if you know not. Surah An-Naml, is it Naml or Nahl?
Surah
An-Nahl.
Surah An-Naml.
Nahl 16, isn't
it?
Nahl?
1643, Nahl. You're right, Nahl.
43, yeah.
And Surah Al-Anbiya as well.
And this is another ayah of the Quran as well, yes. So this is an order for those who do not know about following those who know. The answer, so this is the question arisen, right? What are you going to say to this? The answer is that Allah the Exalted condemned the one who ignores what He has revealed and follows his forefathers instead. This latter type of taqleed was unanimously condemned and declared unlawful by early scholars as well as the four imams. So like you said, we've learned the first thing, taqleed is haram. The type of taqleed we're talking about is to turn away from Allah's ayat and His messenger, away from the revelation, and to go to whoever we think knows, forefathers or ancestors, the ancients and the old. As for taqleed exercised by someone who has spared no effort in following what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed, but part of it was ambiguous to him, it could mean this, it could mean that. We're going to talk about this later as well. So he sought the position of somebody more knowledgeable than him. Then this kind of taqleed is commendable instead of condemnable. It is also rewarded instead of being sinful, as we shall see when we speak about recommended and justifiable taqleed, inshallah. So this is one of the imams of those who don't follow madhabs and don't want to follow the mainstream and the four imams. He followed one of the four imams. Imam Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah was of the Hanbali madhab. He praised the Hanbali madhab. He followed it in its entire sense. Of course, he was a scholar, so he knew more than most lay people, but he defended the four schools in this book and other works as well. And he's proving with his own words here that we should follow the scholars if we don't know something, we don't understand something of our deen. How on earth are we going to get fatwas on zakat and finances and all these kind of things? And it's rewarded if you do that. So this, end of argument, Ustaz. I think we can all go home.
This is the plan was exactly, yeah. So subhanallah, a beautiful point you mentioned there, Sheikh. Now if we just look at a scenario, then is we've had a number of questions through as well. So if you look at one question, saying I've heard that you don't need to follow a madhab, so the kind of argument that is made is that Quran and Sunnah are our primary source, and the argument made is that everyone should access these sources directly. And everyone is required to do what's referred to as ittiba, which is to follow the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the requirement is not to do taqleed. Now, if you just look at the word taqleed, first of all, the root letters qaf, lam, and dal. Okay, and from bab taf'il, qallada yuqallidu taqlidan, fahuwa muqallidun. So someone who does taqlid, and this has the kind of, this bab has the meaning of obedience in it as well, to follow. So basically, all it means is you're blindly following. Now, what we've got to look at is that, is the person you're blindly following, is there a evidence on the other side of it, or is there no evidence? This is it's something that we need to distinguish. Following someone where there is no proof, that is haram. But following someone where there is a proof, and we look at who the someone is, but following someone where there is a proof is what we're referring to and what we're talking about here. Now, if we have an argument, and we're going to argue that you don't need to follow a madhab, okay, that there's a Quran and the Sunnah, and Allah Almighty revealed them. Allah hasn't said in the Quran to do taqleed. The Prophet ﷺ hasn't said in the Hadith Sharif to do taqleed. It's not mentioned there to do taqleed of Imam Abu Hanifa or anybody else. So we're going to argue that it's not, there's no taqleed, you just follow the Quran and Sunnah. Yeah. So if we then have a scenario where somebody accepts Islam today, and it's Zohar namaz time, it's 2 p.m., and they accept Islam today. As soon as they accept Islam, we all know, we'll all agree that Salah is now fard upon that individual. Okay, so Salah is fard upon that individual, and they need to make preparations to pray. So because we've said that they need to follow the Quran and Sunnah, we give them the Quran, the Mus'haf, and we give them the Sihah Sitta. We give them what's referred to as the 6 Sahih books, okay, the famous 6 books. So we give them Hadith books, we give them the Quran, and we say, there you go, brother, akhi, Quran and Sunnah. Yeah, where does he go from there? Sheikh, what's the response to this? Please help me out here. You said to him, there's no madhab. You follow Quran and Sunnah. The guy who just accepted Islam, you put Quran and Sunnah in front of him, and where does he go?
Honestly, Ustaz, I think everybody knows the answer, and I know what your point you're making, and this is the real practicalities of life that we've got to talk about. Nobody, and I'll change the question to you. I'll say, get a grown man, 30, 40 years old, a woman, who's been a born Muslim all their life, reads Quran, reads the books on Islam, and you say to them, right, obviously knows how to practice Islam, bring a new masala to them, say, have you been on Hajj? Never. Have you read about Hajj? Never. Okay, you got to go do Hajj. Don't ask anybody what to do. You're not allowed to follow people. You're not allowed to follow Madhabs. Don't pick up books on Hajj. Pick up the Quran. Pick up these books and go do your Hajj. I think they would be like, I can figure this out. Why are people walking that way for? Which I know people do think they do tawaf clockwise. They don't know. You got to go there. You're going to follow people. How do you know which way to go? Clockwise, anti-clockwise? Who's going to follow? Right. Yes. So you can't practice the faith of Islam without following the Quran and Sunnah, without a doubt, Ustaz.
Yes.
But there's got to be some facilitation of the understanding of the Quran and Sunnah to every lay person. One of the scholars mentioned this. If he said we did this to people and we actually got them to sit down and do this, he said there'd be no schools, there'd be no doctors, there'd be no hospitals, nothing would be running, because everyone's too busy trying to figure out how to pray, how to fast, how to do everything. If you want to tell them to busy themselves, so we've got everybody figuring out how to do all these things from the Quran and Sunnah directly, figuring it all out. And who's going to do the rest of the stuff in the world? So we're not saying you can't do that. It's possible. It can be done, and scholars have done it.
Yeah.
And you can go to get. But is every single person, first of all, going to do it? Second of all, qualified to do it? Third of all, even going to get to any success in it? And what we find is no. There was only, and let's make a valid point here for our viewers. Let me ask you the question, so you probably know the answer, but for our viewers, how many Sahaba could actually go to the Quran and Sunnah and from the Prophet ﷺ tell the rulings of Islam? How many Sahaba?
From my understanding, please correct me if I'm wrong, but from the hundreds of thousands of Sahaba there was 17 of them who
SubhanAllah, I was going to say 17 is what I've read. Yeah. So you've said 17 as well. Exactly.
To
17.
Do ijtihad, which means basically they had the skills and the ability to derive rulings from the Quran and the Sunnah. And this is the thing now. See, when we have a principle Islamically, we don't look at what the exception is. Like you're saying that it's possible for someone to reach that level where they can access the Quran and Sunnah directly. It's possible, but that's very, very rare. That's like 1 in a billion that you're talking about here. And that we won't
Yeah.
base a rule on the 1 in a billion. We will base the rule on the generality and the general situation. We don't look at exceptions. The rule is never based on the exception. The rule is always based on the norm. Now, mashallah, you're a teacher, I'm a teacher. People who we teach, they come to us not even knowing the fara'id of wudu, not even knowing the fara'id of
Yeah.
ghusl. They don't even know the basics. They don't even know how to do istinja properly. They don't even know how to wash themselves after they've been to the toilet. Are they really going to access the Quran and Sunnah directly to work out how to deal with every aspect of Islam and their life? So it's an idea which is just an idea. There's no practicality to it. There's no reality to it. And every single person who says that they are a ghair muqallid, a non-taqlid, someone who doesn't do taqlid, they are all muqallids. No one can leave that. No one in this day and age that people that we generally deal with can step out of that circle of this taqlid, and following.
Yeah.
So here the thing, and this particular individual, like I said, someone's accepted Islam. What does he do? Okay, you've got a 13-year-old who just reached the age of puberty, right? Namaz is now fard upon him. Fasting is fard upon him. He's going to have to go to the Quran and find out how to make wudu. He's going to have to go to the Sunnah and find out how to make wudu. He goes to the Quran. Quran's in Arabic. He doesn't even know how to read Arabic or understand Arabic. Hadiths are in Arabic. What's he going to do? It's impossible for him to be able to, at that age, go and be able to access this information. So what we say then is that when we talk about taqleed and when we talk about following a school, what we're basically saying is that you're following a school, which means you're following the sound understanding of someone unanimously agreed to be qualified to derive the rulings directly from the primary texts, right? An act which is very complex, not to mention potentially dangerous if you're not qualified. It's dangerous if you're not qualified, and you could end up doing wrong things or coming to wrong conclusions. So what we're basically saying here, we're saying, please somebody make life easy for us. So what happens is the scholars who reach that level, who we call mujtahids, they reached that level where they could access the primary texts. They went to the Quran and Sunnah, access the primary text, and then they put the kind of structure in place to say, this is how you make wudu, this is how you do ghusl, this is how you do tayammum, this is how you remove impurities, this is how you fast, this is how you do perform salah, this is how you, everything is covered and systematically broken down. Definitely the proofs are there, but it's too burdensome upon every common person to go and look into the details of the proofs, as to what them proofs are. So these
Ustaz, are you monopolizing the Quran and Sunnah to a group of people? Is it just the property and the right of the scholars now? What about, aren't we allowed to look at the Quran and Sunnah? You've made it something that we can only go through the scholars. What's going on?
Absolutely, you can and you should. So we say to anyone who asks that question, we'll say, yeah, go for it. And let us know how you get on.
Good answer.
No,
so in this regard, I want to quote an ayah of the Quran. There's an ayah of the Quran that actually refers to this very concept. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلَوْ رَدُّوهُ إِلَى الرَّسُولِ وَأُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْهُمْ لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنْبِطُونَهُ مِنْهُمْ. What this means is the translation there. But if they had referred it back to the messenger or to those of authority among them, أُولِي الْأَمْرِ مِنْهُمْ. What does Allah say then? لَعَلِمَهُ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَنْبِطُونَهُ. Then the ones who can yastanbitun, which means to derive, to draw conclusions. It says who can draw correct conclusions from it, from the Quran and Sunnah, it would have known about it. This ayah actually tells us the Messenger knows, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and he's got students, the Sahaba. Among them are people that also know. So when you differ over something, when there is an affair that needs clarification, then what do? You go to the people of knowledge, which we said before in the other ayah, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the followers of the remembrance if you know not. So this is very important, that we're not monopolizing something and saying the scholars only. With the doors open to everyone, like you said. Whoever qualifies in that scholarship has the right and the qualifications to tell us what the meanings, in their opinion, is of this particular ayah of the Quran. And I think we need to mention one point here actually before we carry on. There are certain things in the Quran and Sunnah that don't require interpretation.
That's right. It's
Okay,
simple.
we don't need to be told that Qul huwallahu ahad. We can go tafsir and the delicate, grammatical, meanings of the Quran and the Arabic language. But the basic concept of say Allah is one is very straightforward, right? We don't need a scholar to give us any. There's no difference of opinion. There
Yes.
can't be because Allah is one.
Yes.
So certain things in the Quran, certain concepts and ideas and rulings, 5 daily prayers. We don't need a scholar to tell us that. That's established. It's
Yeah.
done and dusted. There's
Look at
no
one
difference of
hadith, you can find that
possible.
information. Yeah.
It's not even possible to have a difference. No,
Yeah.
those are not where the areas where we need to have a discussion or worry about. They finished, done and dusted. Nobody disagrees about that. Everyone says that's part of this deen and their necessities, and we all know them. What we're talking about here is situations that arise are not normal. There's sometimes ambiguities or multiple interpretations. What we mean, you could give to a particular Quranic ayah or a hadith or understanding to a particular event during the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ. How do we understand those events is qualified scholarship, is any qualified scholarship, and they could differ for that reason. This scholar is qualified and this scholar is qualified, but they might differ because not everyone's going to think in the same way or understand the same approach and methodology. And the proof of this is in the Sahaba themselves, Ustadh, right?
Yes,
This didn't
definitely.
happen 100 years later or 2 years later to the four madhabs or the imams. The Sahaba, and I would say even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they differed amongst each other.
They did.
Now they had the Prophet ﷺ to clarify, but they didn't stop them from differing until they got clarification, right?
Definitely. And the thing is that many of the differences that you have between the madhabs, this is one of the things that people ask. They say, why is there difference in the madhabs? The main reason why there's difference between the madhabs, so just to highlight for the people that there are 4 madhabs which are being accepted by the ummah and as being the established 4 schools, which are the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i and Hanbali. And these are the 4 schools that we follow. So basically here now, the fundamental differences between the schools are actually, you could trace back to differences between the Sahaba, radiyallahu anhum ajma'in. So there were differences between the Sahaba is what then resulted in differences between the Aimma Arba'a. Now the beautiful
just to mention a hadith, Ustad. I just remembered the hadith in time of the Prophet ﷺ. It's in Sahih Muslim, the hadith, sound hadith. The Prophet sent a group. I'm going to summarize very quickly because we've got a lot to discuss. He sent a group of companions to a particular land, Bani Qurayza, a tribe of the Jews, and he said, "Don't pray Asr until you get there. لا يصلين العصر حتى إلا في Bani Qurayza." Right? Don't pray Asr kama qala salatu wasalam until you get to Bani Qurayza. So on the way there, the sun was setting, Ustaz, right?
Yes.
And some of the Sahaba said, "We're not going to make it. If we wait till we get to Bani Qurayza, this land, Asr is gone, and we're going to be in sunset, and we're going to prepare Maghrib, and what's going to do with Asr." So the Sahaba said, "We're going to stop and pray, and then we'll go and get to the place where we were sent at Maghrib time." Others said, No. And what they meant was, and they said the Prophet only said pray Asr there, i.e., make sure you get there before Asr and pray it there. But we're not going to be able to do that, so let's pray Asr now, and let's go there and pray Maghrib there. So we're not going to be disobeying the Prophet ﷺ. We just tried our best to do what he said, which is get there quick. We haven't been able to do so. Let's just pray and go. Some of the Sahaba said, No. The Prophet said pray Asr in Bani Qurayza, and he meant it like that. You know what? We're not going to pray until we get there. We can't go against the literal wording of the Prophet ﷺ. So guess what? They waited. Some Sahaba prayed. Some Sahaba waited and prayed in Bani Qurayza. And they differed. And it doesn't say in the hadith they were animosity, but there was a thing that they wanted to find out who was right, of course. Prophet's still with them. So when they return or they see the Prophet ﷺ, whenever that happened, they tell the Prophet ﷺ. They say, what happened? Or they say, this happened, O Messenger of Allah. Some prayed on the way. Some prayed when they got there. Who's right? What's going on? They wanted some clarification. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? You're right, you're wrong. No, what did he say? He didn't say anything.
Yes.
He didn't. He did not tell off anybody or say anything rough or harsh to anyone. He been silent.
There you go.
So who is right, who is wrong? We don't know. There was a right and wrong problem. We don't know.
Well, the thing is that the silent approval.
Differed.
The silent approval of the Prophet showed
right.
that they both were right. They both were
valid.
in
I think this is a good way to put it. They were both valid in their own right.
Both valid because
so
they both.
If we have got differences, dear listeners, it's very important. Then you shouldn't be. And it's a very important point because I've come across people that when they come across differences among scholars or rulings, right, they get really upset They think, how can Islam have two rulings on one thing?
Yeah.
This is contradictory. Our deen is not as pristine as it's always made out to be. Or this is, weird. It can only be one ruling in Islam. This, that has come through this problem of Quran Sunnah is only one thing. We see that here in the saying of the Prophet ﷺ, two understandings right there in front of him, and he's allowing it. He's not even saying this was right, that was wrong. He's allowing it. So, dear listeners, viewers, do not get upset. Do not get worried if you see several opinions, contradictory even. I think there's a question coming about that on one matter. There's room for all. There's validity for all. Another hadith, the Prophet said, when a judge, actually a mujtahid, a scholar makes a إذا اجتهد, if he tries his best. This is where the word mujtahid comes from, this hadith. If he tries his best and he makes a judgment, so this means who's qualified. You try your best means you're qualified. And he makes a judgment on a ruling. Obviously, the Prophet is saying, look, you're going to have to figure out certain things in Islam. And he gets it right, he gets two rewards.
Yeah, ajrain.
And if he tries his best, إذا اجتهد, same thing. And he gets it wrong, but he doesn't know it's wrong because we don't know who's right and wrong. But if he gets it wrong, with Allah it's wrong, he still gets
one reward.
One reward.
For the
both
effort.
the rulings, both the opinions are valid. They're not incorrect and correct. They're correct. One may be correct and valid and the right one with Allah, but Allah accepts both of them. So if you're to answer the question we've got as well, somebody is saying, what if people follow one person and it's contradictory to another person, another scholar, and you can't practice both, it means you're invalid. So let's say common example given is when you break wudu from bleeding or not. It's a common example, isn't it? If you bleed, does it break your wudu? Some scholars say no, some scholars say yes. Okay, I've got a cut, I bled. Okay, I take the opinion bleeding breaks your wudu, so I go do wudu and I pray. My prayer is fine. That person takes opinion bleeding doesn't break the wudu, so he goes and prays without making a wudu. He's bleeding and he just prays. Right, he wipes the blood off, prays. I'm like, you can't do that. He's like, I can. What's going to go on here? They're both following, as long as they are, and they are in this case, both following valid opinions of scholars who looked at the Quran, looked at the Sunnah, looked at the Hadith, and these matters are not crystal clear, by the way. If they were, there would have been no difference. Why would scholars differ just randomly? There's a reason, and this reason was due to the evidences and the Hadith. And one scholar, a group of scholars came up with this particular understanding. Another, it's groups. We always say one or this. And this is what happened. So dear viewers and listeners, do not be startled, alarmed, worried if you come across differences. Differences is a mercy. Differences is expansion and goodness for us. It's really important to understand that. And the Sahaba differed, like we said, they differed on that occasion. They differed on many occasions after that as well, on many things, about prayer, about zakat, about inheritance, about communal affairs, the punishments, the governance, judgments, qada in the courts, so many things that occurred during the lifetime of the Sahaba themselves, and they didn't always agree on the rulings. They always had different understandings. Sometimes they're different understandings. So this is something that is part and parcel of our religion, guys. And to shut it down and say it's not, should only be one opinion and one following, because only one Quran and Sunnah, is actually misleading and incorrect. There's only one Quran and Sunnah, but how you understand the Quran and Sunnah when it's not clear is the challenge. This is Allah's will. This is how Allah wanted it to be. Somebody might say, why is it like that for? Because this is the wisdom of Allah. Why are you down this earth for? And you get ill and you go to sleep and you get fatigue and you got to earn for a living and you get illnesses and you get cured and you have loved ones, you lose. It's all Allah's plan to send us down the earth and put us through challenges. That's that's what life is about.
Sheikh's very beautiful point you make, and just to add to that, if I may, you've got. If I ask a question for to illustrate this point for our listeners and viewers, did the Prophet ﷺ pray in exactly the same way throughout the entire period of his blessed life? This is a yes or no question. Did the Prophet pray the same way throughout the blessed life, or were there different?
From my understanding of the Quran and the Hadith in particular, no, the Prophet ﷺ did not pray in one way all his lifetime. No.
All his life, right? So initially, the Prophet ﷺ used to pray in a certain way, and the other times the Prophet would pray in a different way, and this is what happened. So now, if we look at the mercy of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, that when you have the Hanafis praying their way and the Malikis praying their way, the Malikis have their hands by their side. Hanafis tie their hands underneath the belly button. The Shafi'is do Rafa Yadain, raising of the hands. So the Hanbalis have their own way of praying. Each one of these ways is reflective of the prayer of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam,
And
yes.
if everybody prayed the same way, then you could say 3/4 of the Sunnah way of praying would be lost, wouldn't it? Because
Yes.
in each one of the madhabs, different aspects of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam blessed way of praying is being preserved. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preserving through the acceptance He's granted to these madhabs, that He's preserving the different ways in which the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to pray. And if we all pray the same way, then 3/4 of that would be lost. And the beauty is, when I see a Shafi'i reading Salah the Shafi'i way, it puts a smile to my face. I think, subhanAllah, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam used to pray like this. Yeah, at a certain point. And the Prophet used to pray like, the way the Malikis do. So we're preserving the madhabs. The difference is actually a way of preserving the Sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi
You made an amazing
wasallam.
point.
We need to look at it from
Ustadh.
that point of view. Yeah, that point of view.
If you want to be just one, you got to wipe out a lot of the practices. You're right. That's amazing. So look how beloved every action of the Prophet was. SubhanAllah, every single action of the Prophet, or most of them. Look how, if we take the difference of opinion, we continue. So sometimes the Prophet did play with his hands raised, and Muslims do that today. Sometimes he didn't have his hands raised. Muslims do that today. We have both practices. We don't have to enforce one and remove the other. Why? Because all the practices of the Prophet ﷺ are beloved to Allah. And why would they be wiped off?
And Sheikh, we say that, look, for example, I have a teacher who is a Maliki. We all know teachers who are Maliki, Shafi'i. Do they ever argue, or do they just smile and think, subhanAllah, look, you're reading your way, I'm reading my way? That's fine, because it's all backed by the Sunnah, it's all backed by Hadith Mubaraks and evidences, and there's beauty in that. So there's nothing to be upset about. There's beauty in that. And so when you try and kind of making sure everybody's just following one way, then much of the Sunnah will be lost. And Allah Almighty will not allow that to happen, hence why He has preserve the Sunnah of His beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam through granting acceptance to the four schools of thought that we have.
Just on that point, Ustaz, we mentioned the Sahaba.
Yes.
And we mentioned there were 17 also. Amongst them was Sayyidah Aisha, female scholar, Sayyidah Salama, I believe. Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Masud, the four caliphs, Mu'adh ibn Jabal, Zayd ibn Thabit, Abu Musa al-Ashari, great scholars of the Sahaba who gave rulings. And the Imams that we're talking about came around 80 AH, 150 AH, 200 AH, during that time. So just to mention to our viewers that the circle of ijtihad did increase, by the way. So it was 17 Sahaba. It wasn't like, it's going to be 10 after them. During the second generation of the followers, there were actually hundreds probably. I think I read a book on history of Islamic legislation, and there was about 130 mentioned, and there might be more actually. But it went up to 130 qualified scholars around the Muslim world, right? So in Mecca, Medina, Iraq, Kufa, Basra, Egypt, these where the Muslims expanded to, they sent teachers, Damascus, and scholars established themselves there. They were students of the Sahaba. Who were they? They were the students of the Sahaba and the following generation after that. And they became the leaders. In scholarship. They were now the ones that had studied, understood, and were qualified to give fatwa. So at that time, the rest of the ummah were doing what, Ustaz? Following these scholars. That's taqleed. They were following a madhab. Following a scholar is following a madhab. Now they weren't following as a book codified over hundreds of years, but directly they weren't asking for what's your proof, right? In fact, in the times, I think in Mecca, one of the during the Abbasid times, one of the great imams, I think it was Ata, he was given the authority to give fatwa only. So if you want a fatwa in Mecca, you only have one person to go to. Why? They didn't want confusion amongst the masses. He gives one fatwa, he gives one fatwa. So they weren't. So this idea of restricting to one madhab actually did occur at some points. We need to be fair and mention that. Although it's not required, by the way. Scholars agree that it's not required as like an obligation from Allah and His Messenger Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and Islam to follow one school all your life and never change and so forth. But practically speaking, and in terms of how Muslims are going to live their lives, I think most, if not all, or generally most Muslims will end up following one way, And that's
Yeah.
because of ease of access, the teachers around them. People living in Kufa, who are they going to follow? Somebody living in all the way in Morocco. Kufa is
Yeah.
in Iraq,
Sheikh,
Morocco is all the way. They're
look
not
at
going
the
to follow
people
that.
here.
They're going to follow whatever's local to them.
Definitely, if you look at the people here in the UK, right, where we live, right?
Yeah.
So you bring it home. Most people in the UK are Hanafis. Yeah.
I would
Because
say so,
especially
yeah.
the people who have got the Pakistani background, especially Indo-Pak, their parents go from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and they're all Hanafis, right? They come here, they're Hanafis. The scholarship, most of the scholars here, they are Hanafi scholars. They follow the Hanafi madhab. So, for
That's the
example,
case.
we live here, we're Hanafis. If I was to move from here and move to North Africa, for example, and live in North Africa, and I decided to move to North Africa and live in North Africa for the rest of my life, I would most likely change from being a Hanafi to a Maliki.
Because
Because now
the Muslims
the
there
senior
follow.
scholars and the Muslims in the area are mainly Malikis. Okay, if you went to Yemen and places like that, you would most likely become a Shafi'i, because the access that you've got to the scholars and the learning and the teaching and the study circles and everything are basically backed in Malaysia and places like that, backed by that particular madhab. So when it comes to, you got to look at that. We don't say that, for example, let's say we go back to my example of a person accepting Islam. We're not going to say, right, bro, you're right, akhi, choose one of the 4 schools. Which one do you want to pick? Yeah, it's not going to be like that. But he's going to obviously naturally go with a madhab which is going to be most accessible. And that's the idea here. He could choose any one of the 4. We're not saying one of the 4 has to be imposed on him, but we're saying he will choose the one that is most accessible. What's the community following? What's the general masses following in that area? What are the scholars learning and teaching in that area? And Sheikh, you mentioned a beautiful point. Chances are people will follow one madhab all of their life. And to be honest, people have lived and died without even understanding one madhab properly. Never mind 2 madhabs or 3 or 4.
Yeah.
People
And
even say to
they've
me,
lived and died without knowing what a madhab is. They
madhab
just got on
is.
with their
They just get on
lives,
with it.
praying,
They just get
fasting,
on
and
with
doing
it.
the
They
obligation.
just get on with it. And people even say to me, what does the Maliki school say about this? And what does the Shafi'i school say? I say, how do you even know? I'm still learning the Hanafi school. I'm still learning the
Subhanallah.
rulings in the Hanafi school. Yeah, we have a look every so often as to what the other madhabs are mentioning, but it's not really a big thing for us, because we just focus upon our communities and our students and our the local population, and their needs are not met by the Maliki, Shafi, and Hanbali madhab, because they are predominantly following the Hanafi
Okay,
madhab.
Ustaz, one question that came in, and I think it's good to answer the questions, so a lot of them, and they relate to the topic. We mentioned the Sahaba 17, over 100 Tabi'un. It increased as well in the second generation, third generation. There was great Imams and scholars. Just to mention, when we say Hanafi Madhab and Imam Abu Hanifa and his circle had 40 students who were all qualified great Imams, who all discussed with him and tried to refute him and debate with him, and not just say, yes, Ustaz, yeah, of course, you're the Ustaz. No, his main student, Imam Zufar, differed the most with him. Imam Zufar is not known as the main student, but he was. He took over the circle after Imam Abu Hanifa. Imam Zufar ibn al-Hudhali, Imam Zufar al-Hudhali, rahmatullah alayh, one of the great scholars and students of Imam Abu Hanifa. He differed on loads of things, not just several. Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad agreed on most things, but differed. They were discussing things, and they were always, kind of debating and so forth. But the question I wanted to ask was, why do we then have 4? If I'm saying there were 17, then there was more scholars in the second generation and even more. How did we get down to 4? What happened? Did you restrict it? Did we become all, what do you call, narrow-minded and not like trying to think for ourselves and allow the scholars to have their own madhabs? Did we stop them from following them? And did we narrow it down ourselves as the people at the time? What happened? Why is there only 4?
What happened was that the madhabs followed a natural course. And you had, the Imams, and like you're mentioning this point about Imam Abu Hanifa, rahimahullah, that he was a mujtahid, and he was the founder of the school. But the likes of Imam Zufar and Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad, they were mujtahids within the school. Yeah, they were mujtahid fil madhab. They were mujtahid in the school. And we've mentioned before that you cannot follow, like, for example, a layman, a common person, we have to follow a madhab, right? Because we don't have the
Yeah.
access to the primary texts. But people like Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad and Imam Zafar, they were mujtahid fil madhab. They did have the ability to access Quran and Sunnah directly. So it wasn't
Yeah.
permissible for them to just put the mundi down like people do in front of Pir Sahib and say, Pir Sahib, this is so theek hai. It wasn't like that. They
Wasn't
were
like
not
that.
allowed to take Imam Abu Hanifa's ruling without scrutinizing the evidences. Yeah,
Yes,
because a
that's right.
mujtahid cannot take the ruling of another mujtahid
Another
because
mujtahid. Yes,
he
has to be
has the
independent.
ability to access. So what's the asl? The asl is that if a person has the ability to access Quran and Sunnah, that's definitely what you're going to have to do. If you can't do that, then you do taqleed. With these great imams, because they had the ability to access the primary sources, then they couldn't just take Imam Abu Hanifa's ruling. They had to discuss and look at the evidence. And this is why there's a question that I was asked as well, is why is there a difference of opinion within a school? Yeah, the reason why the difference of opinion
Correct.
within the school is because each mujtahid within the school is required to carry out ijtihad and come to a
Jihad,
conclusion
yes.
based on what his understanding is of the Quran and the Sunnah. And what happened was that the students of Imam Abu Hanifa were working hard at spreading and teaching their madhab and helping
Yeah.
and guiding people, because people couldn't access
Mhm.
Quran and Sunnah directly. It's not practical, so they were breaking it down, make it fake, okay, this is what you do, this is what you do, etc. And then Allah Almighty granted acceptance to these four schools. That after time, there was, look, if students do not follow and carry on the legacy of their teacher, then they're just going to fizzle out. And that's exactly
That's
what
it.
happened. There were other schools. Imam Awza'i had his school. There were other schools.
Yeah,
They all
Abdurrahman
fizzled out.
al-Awza'i,
They
al-Layth
fizzled
ibn
out
Sa'ad.
because, they didn't have the students to carry their particular madhab forward. And the other reason is whenever you had a political situation where there was a government, the government would adopt a particular madhab to
Yes.
run the state.
The
And
affairs,
then
yeah.
that got prominence. So a certain madhab got prominence because it was adopted by the state. It became the madhab of the state, so to speak. Then what happened was that the material and the teachings and all that was pushed. So what happened was a certain madhab was pushed because it had the backing of the state and the government. So eventually what you ended up with
Mhm.
was four madhabs. But it didn't take a long time for it to end up being four, because if you look at the great scholars that have gone in the past, Imam Ghazali, yeah, Shafi'i, look at Imam Ibn Hajar, look at the great Sayyidina Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, Hanbali, great scholars who were, oceans of knowledge, all muqallids, all doing taqleed of
Yes.
the madhabs
Alhamdulillah.
and the Imam. Imam Bukhari was a Shafi'i, Imam Muslim was a Shafi'i, yeah. So they were all
Mhm.
following that. And the other, Sheikh, there's an important point I want to mention here. If you're happy with what I've explained there, I'd like to just mention.
Yeah, I just want to reiterate a few points before you
Yes,
mention that.
please.
First
Yes,
of all, I'd
please.
like to reiterate the point that we all agree we've got to follow the Quran and Sunnah. We said this at the
Yes.
beginning. We're not calling anybody to other than the Quran and Sunnah here on this
Yeah.
podcast. I never have I in life called
Yeah.
anybody other than to the Quran and Sunnah. The only issue is, how do you understand the Quran and Sunnah? And that's what our discussion is today. We've said if you're qualified, you have the scholarship, and you could understand the Quran, the Sunnah, then Bismillah, go ahead. You're a qualified scholar, is known as a mujtahid. And a
Yes.
mujtahid is, we've clarified another point here. A mujtahid, someone who's qualified to drive rulings from the Quran and Sunnah, is
Yes.
not allowed to follow somebody else. Okay,
No.
so that's the category of person where it is haram. We'd say it's haram and not allowed
Yes.
for that individual to go and take the understanding of something, close his mind down and say, I don't care, I know what it means. I think it means this is my opinion, and I'm qualified, but I'm just going to listen to that person. No, they exercise their own ijtihad. So this is the point we mentioned. Then we said that those who can't access the Quran and Sunnah because it's not practical for every single Muslim to be able to do that, and even in the Sahaba, there was only 17 or so Sahaba and Tabi'un, 100 or so, that could do that. So the rest of the Muslims would follow their understanding of the Quran and Sunnah. They will find the Quran and Sunnah, but through the understanding of the qualified scholars and individual amongst them. And then we've just said, why did they become four? Why do we have this Maliki, Shafi, Hanafi, Hanbali? Why is it four? Why is it four? First of all, there wasn't just four. There was Madhab of Imam al-Awza'i, which was followed, and he had students, and they were spread around the world. He's buried in Beirut in Lebanon. He was from Damascus. I used to live in the area he's from. He's known as Awza'i because he lived in Awza'. I used to live in Awza'. Oh, actually, I used to live next door to Awza' in Damascus when I was there. And somebody told me Imam Awza'i is from here. I goes, Why is he from here for? He goes, this is called Awza'. You know, I was like, subhanAllah. So that's why it's called
SubhanAllah.
Awza'i. Because yes, because he traveled to Lebanon, was buried there, he passed away there. You know, the land, so the Sahaba went to Damascus, and some of the Sahaba buried there as well. There was the Madhab of Layth ibn Sa'd. You know, he was a scholar, and people followed him. And you know, in fact, I think Imam Malik was asked, or Imam Shafi was asked, I think, why the Madhab of Imam Awza'i didn't last, and the Madhab of Imam Malik did. You know, and you know, he said what you said, Ustadh, I read this. He said because Imam Malik had students who were loyal to him and followed his way and supported him, and Imam Al-Awza'i didn't have as many scholars who were loyal to him and followed him and carry on his tradition. Of course, he had students that were great students, and you know, a lot of people benefited from him, but not in the same way as they carried on the legacy of these other imams. So, due to the fact of these factors we mentioned, what Ustadh just pointed out there, political factors, government, certain rulings, certain imams, certain methodologies of understanding the Quran and Sunnah became prominent. But I was going to add one thing to that, though, Ustadh. That doesn't mean they became stagnant. There was always scholars who may have followed the methodology, but they were constantly scrutinizing, reviewing, checking, going back and forth, and making sure that what they had understood from their teachers, from the scholars before them, was in line with the Quran Sunnah. They were comparing. So comparative fiqh is something that's studied as a topic, as a subject. And the scholars of the early days were massive scholars of Imam Quduri. He's got a 20 volume book, I think it is, called the Quduri's, I forgot what it's called, Taysir, I think it's called. Imam Quduri compares the Shafi and Hanafi school and other scholars like Maliki and so forth. And he's got 20, so long, such depth discussions, why they differed, what their evidences are, And it's a very, very nuanced, detailed, scholarly discussion that even I struggle to follow sometimes, and you have to take a step back and get, ask a fellow teacher, fellow colleague, what do you understand by this? All right, this is why they differed. And it goes back to Quranic ayat, goes back to Arabic language, it goes back to hadith, the classification. So many factors that, like we said, it's not possible for every single Muslim to be able to do that. So we have to then trust someone who is qualified to provide that for us. Right. So Bismillah, Ustaz, you were going to say something. I want
to mention here, like the point you were mentioning, like for example, we're not just relying upon, when we come to the Hanafi school, for example, we're not just relying upon the individual person of Imam Abu Hanifa, right? Imam Abu Hanifa,
brilliant point.
If you take a step back, right, there's the hadith regarding Hazrat Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiyallahu anhu. We studied this in Usul al-Shashi and the Usul al-Fiqh, and I have this marked. I can tell you off the top of my head that the hadith Mubarak is in Abu Dawood Sharif. The hadith Mubarak is also in Tirmizi Sharif as well, and there's also a narration in the Musnad of Imam Ahmed. But because I came downstairs in a rush, my books are still upstairs, right? But I have the hadith Mubaraks marked in there, and the kind of summary of the hadith Mubarak is that the Prophet ﷺ was sending Hazrat Mu'adh ibn Jabal away and on an expedition, and he said to him that, what will you rule by? What will you judge and rule by? And he said, I will judge and rule by the Quran. And then the Prophet ﷺ said to him that if you do not find what you're looking for in the Quran, then what will you do? And then he said, then I will rule from the Sunnah. Okay. And then the Prophet ﷺ said, and if you do not find what you need and what you're looking for in the Sunnah, what will you do? And then he said, then I will exercise my judgment. Yeah, I will do ijtihad regarding this. And the Prophet ﷺ was ijtihad. And then the Prophet ﷺ struck him on his chest. And this was one of the ways that the Prophet ﷺ would grant fairs, spiritual nourishment and blessings to the Sahaba. He would strike them on the chest, and we from some from the Naqshbandi Silsila, we do zikr khafi. And there is this idea of the physical touch having an effect. When the Prophet ﷺ did dua for Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anh, he embraced Hazrat Abdullah ibn Abbas as well. So as well as making dua for him, there was a physical touch and connection chest to chest, what you could call a downloading of information from the Prophet ﷺ to Hazrat Abdullah ibn
Sallallahu
Abbas. So
Alaihi
he
Wasallam.
struck him in the chest, and then the Prophet was well pleased with this reply and response from Hazrat Muaz ibn Jabal radiallahu anh, which basically tells you that not the answer to everything is not in the Quran, and the answer to everything is not found in the Hadith Mubarak, because the Prophet ﷺ
Because the
said,
Prophet asked the question.
yeah, what if you don't find the answer there? Oh, well, I'll go to the Sunnah. What if you don't find the answer there? Then I will exercise my judgment. So this ijtihad was there at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam encouraged this ijtihad to take place and for exercising judgment. Now, what did Imam Abu Hanifa do? Imam Abu Hanifa laid out principles based on the Quran and Sunnah, which were then going to act as a framework for rulings to be derived, right? So he's put the framework together, principles together, so that to make sure shaitan doesn't misguide anyone with regards to this. And he put a framework together. And you see, the Hanafi madhab is not a madhab which is based on one single person's opinion. This is a shura'i madhab. This is a shura, a council, where the mujtahid imams, the mujtahid fil madhab imams, they've got together and discussed and debated and decided. And sometimes Imam Abu Hanifa is on one side and Imam the Sahibana on the other side, Imam Abu Yusuf and Imam Muhammad. Sometimes Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Yusuf to one side and Imam Muhammad on his own. So they've gone, and there's so many so much input, and then it's right, this is the ruling that we're gonna kind of have established as the ruling of our school. So basically, we're not following the individual Imam Abu Hanifa. When we say we follow Imam Abu Hanifa, we meaning we follow his madhab. He is the one who outlined the framework that all of the rulings are derived within the framework and the principles that have been laid down by Imam Abu Hanifa. And then the principles laid down by Imam Malik, and the principles laid down by Imam Shafi'i, and the principles laid down by Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. The next thing I want to mention
Ustaz, I just want to I really want to reiterate the points, because I want our listeners to understand these points are actually seriously important and really required to get into our heads. I just want to make this point. We don't follow somebody called Abu Hanifa, whose name was Nu'man ibn Thabit. He's an imam, he's great, but that individual person who lived in Kufa in Iraq, this was his lineage. We don't follow that person as a person, as a personality.
Hijrah.
80 AH. We don't follow him like, he's the prophet, or he's, we don't follow him. No. What we do regarding what he had was his knowledge. Allah granted him knowledge, and the scholars, his teachers knew he was a great scholar, and his students knew, and his colleagues knew, and the Muslim world knew, and today we still mention him. So the scholarship within him is what gave him his rank and status, and we love him as well. We actually do love him and respect him as a person as well, but we don't actually follow that. We follow the scholarship, the knowledge. Where is knowledge from? From Allah, that he was granted to him, that allowed him and those with him, as you mentioned, to become qualified to understand the Quran and Sunnah. I would like to pose the question to those who don't follow a school of thought. Who do you follow with such knowledge, such acceptance, such pedigree, such degree of knowledge and accurate, qualified scholarship that could even come close to the dust that Imam Abu Hanifa walked upon, 100%. Or his students, or Imam Malik, or Imam Shafi? The knowledge they had supersedes most people after them. And this is one of the reasons why Allah also chose for their understanding. Because think about it, why would Allah choose just theirs? And I'll put it logically to you, wouldn't Allah have chosen for us what was the closest to the correct way of worship, the closest to the Sunnah, the way that the Prophet Allah wanted us to understand what the Prophet meant in the Hadith? Because it was, we all got it wrong, which is what some people think, these Imams and their students, and they all got it wrong for 1,000 years. Now we come to correct it, and you actually believe the scholars of today, or 1,000 years later, have somehow miraculously got the correct understanding. And the students of the Sahaba, the students of the Sahaba, the early pious generations, the ones that the Prophet spoke about highly, got it all wrong, and we shouldn't follow them. We should follow you, because we're still going to follow somebody.
The thing here is, what they're saying is, that for the layman, they're saying, okay, on one hand, it's like a bit of a Boris Johnson thing, to be honest. That, oh, you don't blind follow, but follow, right? Don't blind follow anyone, but you can blind follow a mujtahid. What they're basically saying is that, for example, if there was someone, a lay person who didn't have access to the Quran and Sunnah, they think for that particular individual it's permissible to do taqleed of an imam who is worthy of doing taqleed of. I would say, what do you mean? Someone like Imam Abu Hanifa?
Yeah, exactly.
You get me? Someone like Imam Malik, is that what you're referring to? Because what they're saying is, on one hand, they're saying don't do taqleed, but then really what they want to say is don't do taqleed of them imams, do our taqleed.
Yeah, because how is a Muslim going to follow the rules of Islam? He's going to follow
they're saying you
someone.
have to
Don't
follow
follow
somebody.
them. They're wrong. Follow us.
They're
We take
wrong.
you to
Follow
Allah
us.
is
Yeah. فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. They even use this ayat of the Quran, say, look, you're right to ask, but don't ask them, ask us. Then do you know what the spin they put on it?
Another question on that. But here's a question that has come up actually. You're asking us to follow people who no longer exist. They've gone. And these scholars are alive, the big sheikhs of today. Why are you following deceased people and their understanding? And why are you not following living people? Is there a reason we should listen to the argument, or is that a valid argument or not?
Life or death, is it? At the end of the day, it's not an issue of living and the dead. The issue is the level of understanding that they had and the level of acceptance that has been granted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala off the back of that. Yeah. And the thing here is, for example, people say, okay, Quran and Sunnah or Abu Hanifa. This is how they put it to our lay Muslims, who unfortunately some of them
which is a mockery.
And to be honest with you, our lay people, they can't tell the South Pole from the North Pole. Some of them can't tell the knee from the elbow, and they'll put these questions to them, and they'll say, "Oh well, what do you think? Imam Abu Hanifa or Quran Sunnah?" We say Quran and Sunnah through the framework put in place by Imam Abu Hanifa. That you don't say, oh no, we follow the Quran Sunnah. We don't follow a person. Well, who did Imam Abu Hanifa follow? Did he not follow is that what you're trying to say, that he didn't follow the Quran Sunnah? Of course he followed the Quran Sunnah. And then this is the point I want to make now here, Shaykh, is that when a person becomes, when a person is when you have doctors and you have a consultant. I might have mentioned this when we talked about the awliya discussion. But when there is a consultant, can you say to the consultant, you're not a doctor? Because you're a consultant, you're not a doctor now. No, a doctor is a lower level title. A consultant is a higher level title. A consultant is someone who specializes in a particular field. Yeah? But with the medical training and medical school, ek bunyadi cheez hai that they will all go through. When a person is a mujtahid cannot be a mujtahid until he is a muhaddis. Yes, because until he is a mufassir. Now a muhaddis is someone, a hadith scholar. A mufassir is a Quran scholar, and you cannot. And we've already established that Quran and Sunnah are our primary sources. So how are you going to be a mujtahid and exercise your judgment in accessing the Quran and Sunnah if you don't know the Quran and Sunnah? So then they say, oh well, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal was a muhaddis, and Imam Malik was a muhaddis, and Imam Shafi was a muhaddis, and Imam Abu Hanifa. Well, what was he then? He was even bigger muhaddis than them. They were famous for being muhaddis because they collected hadith in that time, because there was more of a need for that to take place. But Imam Abu Hanifa, being a mujtahid imam, being a muhaddis was a lower level that he'd already surpassed and achieved. Being a mufassir of the Quran was a lower level that he'd already surpassed and achieved. He reached the level of being a faqih. The fuqaha, the mujtahid imams, being a muhaddis and a mufassir is a prerequisite condition for being a mujtahid.
That's
right. And we look when Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani rahmahullah, when he took the Muwatta from Imam Malik. Yeah. So after Imam Abu Hanifa, the main big school is obviously the Malikis, then the Shafi'i, then the Hanbali. Yeah. So Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani studied under Imam Abu Hanifa. He also studied under Imam Abu Yusuf. When he studied, he then went to Medina Munawwara and took the Muwatta from Imam Malik. When he took the Muwatta, the Hadith Sharif, when he took them from Imam Malik, and then he had his own compilation, the Muwatta of Imam Muhammad, which we have present today as well. when he mentions the hadith that he took from Imam Malik, okay, so he'll mention the chain. He'll say from Hazrat Abdullah ibn Umar, yeah, Hazrat Nafi, and then he'll say Imam Malik, yeah. Then he's saying he took from Imam Malik. When he's taken from Imam Malik and he's mentioned 2 or 3 hadith Mubarak, then Imam Muhammad al-Shaybani says, "Wa bihaza na'khuzu." Yeah, we take this. Yeah, wa bihaza na'khuzu. We take this. What has been mentioned in this hadith, we take this. Wa huwa qawlu Abi Hanifata wal amati min fuqahaina. And this is also the position and the view and the verdict of Imam Abu Hanifa and the generality of our fuqaha. Which means that how is Imam Abu Hanifa passing rulings and having positions without hadith? And how is Imam Abu Hanifa passing rulings without having access to the Quran and Sunnah? And another thing I want to mention here is that is a hadith that Imam Bukhari classes as Sahih. That same hadith, is it going to be more Sahih in the time of Imam Abu Hanifa or more Sahih in the time of Imam Bukhari? When the chain is going to be, the chain is shorter, the chain is much shorter, and the chances of the hadith being distorted and fabricated and all of that, the strength of the hadith is going to be much greater by the time it reaches Imam Abu Hanifa than anybody else.
So just on that point, Ustaz, just explain to our viewers what you mean by the strength of the hadith here. Imam Abu Hanifa lived between 80 AH to 150 AH. Okay?
150.
During that time, there was only 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 narrators between the Prophet ﷺ and Imam Abu Hanifa, sometimes 2 even, right? Yes. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. So the chances of any mistakes, of the wording being changed, because wording affects things. The whole idea here, by the way, dear listeners, is the wording is what brings about the ambiguities. Yes. So the wording is going to be more precise when there's less people involved, and so forth. Imam Bukhari passed away in 256 AH, I think. So he was born at the end of the 20th century AH, roughly. So he was about 50 years after Imam Abu Hanifa. And Imam Bukhari is actually celebrated. It's just normal for Imam Abu Hanifa. But it's a celebrated thing with Bukhari Sharif, where you have the thulathiyat, the hadith in Bukhari Sharif that only have 3 narrators between Imam Bukhari and the Prophet ﷺ. There's only a handful of them. Yeah. Most of the hadith in Bukhari Sharif are 4, 5, 6, 7 narrators. Several generations. So when Ustaz is saying the hadith that Imam Hanif had access to, the Imam Malik had access to, the Imam Muhammad had access to, were close to Prophet ﷺ, were of greater authenticity, i.e. less chance of any wordings being misunderstood or transmitted, etc., were much less. And at the same time, I would say another point to add to that, Ustaz, is that the people telling them these hadith would have been much more qualified in understanding them as well.
Yes.
So who are the teachers of Imam Abu Hanifa? The great fuqaha. So this is the ruling Imam Abu Hanifa has. He gives precedence to hadith from fuqaha than non-fuqaha. Meaning, if you're a jurist, a mujtahid, a scholar, if you tell me a hadith, that's got more value because you're a scholar, you know what you're talking about, you know you're a muhaddith, prerequisite is you're a hadith scholar, you're a Quran scholar, then somebody who just narrates hadith or just has some pastime, because everybody should narrate hadith in that day, Ustaz. It wasn't a case of just the scholars. Everybody who had a chance, who had some connection to the scholars, would pass on the hadith. Some were highly proficient, some were not as proficient. Imam Abu Hanifa actually had the conditions where he would take only from the best of the best. And somebody might say, well, Imam Bukhari has stringent conditions. Imam Hanifa had even more stringent and stricter conditions, actually. People should know these things. People think Imam Hanifa's hadith were weak for some reason. No. His were of the highest authenticity.
Yes. And the thing is here, Shaykh, is that the thing is, you might find that a hadith that Imam Abu Hanifa based a ruling on. Imam Bukhari, I'm just giving a situation here. That it might be that when it reached the hadith scholars like Imam Muslim, Imam Bukhari and Imam Tirmidhi, that they classed it as being a Hasan hadith or a weak hadith, for example. But just because it's reached Imam Bukhari and become weak, is that proof that it was weak in the time of Imam Abu Hanifa? Yes.
It depends on the narrators.
This depends on the narrators. So here the thing is, the point here that I want the audience to take away is that Imam Abu Hanifa was a hadith scholar. He had to be a faqih. He had to be a mujtahid imam. With the whole point is that he can access the Quran and Sunnah. right? So he had the knowledge of the hadith, and this is why when Imam Muhammad is taken from Imam Malik and saying that this is what Imam Abu Hanifa's opinion was on, what was he basing his opinions on, right? Not on his desires, because the scholars who were around him, Imam Muhammad, Imam Zufar, Imam Abu Yusuf, they would not allow that. And this is why there's no element of desire here. Why is the
Yeah.
student arguing with the teacher? Because ultimately they are accountable before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and there's
Yeah, they
no
have to do their
allegiances here.
best.
Eh, koi baladri
Yeah.
nahi gal te nahi, na koi rishtedar hai, chalo usne narmi
No,
kari
no,
chhodi,
no, no.
right? Some being a bit soft
Yeah.
with somebody. Hold on a minute. We need to get this right.
They were
And
not
this is the,
related, by the
they're
way. They
not
were
related,
totally
yeah,
separate people.
totally separate, and we need to get this right. So this is the thing
Yeah,
here.
Ustaz, a
Ji,
question I think very important at this point to mention
ji,
is somebody might come in, and there is some questions related to this
yeah,
as well. Um, is that, look, I can understand the hadith. I can, I can understand the Quran. I've got some understanding. And you know what? All of the mujtahid imams, all of the scholars who were great mujtahids, yeah, who knew how to derive rulings, they said something. They said, if you find a hadith that contradicts what I say, then don't follow me, follow the hadith. So if the imams are telling us not to follow them and follow the hadith, then why are we following them, Ustaz? What's going on?
okay. You see here, this is the main kind of argument that is put forward, yeah. And like I said, over the last week or so, this is why it's good to kind of space these kind of discussions out, fortnightly. So it gives us a chance to kind of look at what's being said, by others. And this is one of the main arguments. I've been reading articles and watching videos, and
Yeah,
I've probably watched most of them on YouTube now with all the arguments that they're putting forward.
mashallah.
And they're basically saying that, look, Imam Abu Hanifa said that if you find a Sahih Hadith, then huwa mazhabi, yeah, that when
Madhab,
you
yes.
is my mazhab, yeah. The
My
first
school
thing,
of thought.
my school of thought. Now, the first thing the people need to understand here is that when a faqih, now this can get technical, I'm trying to keep it simple. When a mujtahid imam or a faqih classes a hadith as being sahih, he classes a hadith being sahih from the point of view of the matan, the wording of the hadith. That is what he is interested in. Because like you mentioned, Sheikh Saab, that the differences of understanding and interpretation are going to take place within the matan of the hadith, within the text of the hadith, not in the chain. So the mujtahid imams, they will look at, when they say sahih, they're saying sahih from the point of view of the matan. And when you have the likes of Imam Bukhari calling a hadith sahih, they are talking with regards to the sanad. They mean two different things. One is talking
Mhm.
about a matan, and one is talking about the sanad. And what Imam Abu Hanifa is doing, he's not talking to me and you and saying, oh, when you find a sahih hadith, then take the sahih hadith and abandon what I've said. No, he's talking to the other mujtahid imams, saying that when you do your ijtihad, yes,
Mhm.
when you do your ijtihad and you, through the principles that have been laid out, come to the conclusion that this hadith is sahih, i.e., the text of the hadith is sahih, then that is my madhab. That's what he is
Mhm.
saying. He's not saying, oh, so many years later, 12, 13, 1400 years later, you pick up Bukhari Sharif, find a hadith that says Sahih, and then you say, oh, look, there's Sahih hadith here, and this contradicts what Imam Abu Hanifa said, so therefore we're going to take this particular Sahih hadith in here. It could be that the hadith that you're looking at, Imam Abu Hanifa has seen that, and he's gone for something even more Sahih than that. Yeah? So there's so many
Mhm.
things that are here. And the other thing is that people, they'd have to, this is where the misunderstanding comes. You could have a hadith which is khabar wahid, yeah, so it's khabar
Yep.
wahid, but it is sahih. Is that right?
Just explain khabar wahid for our viewers,
so,
Ustaz.
so basically what you've got is there's different types of transmission. So khabar wahid is basically where there is one chain of transmission coming from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yeah. And basically, when the narrators of the hadith have been assessed, it has reached the level of sahih, but it's only come down one particular chain.
Okay.
The chain is sound, but there's one. So now the hadith is sahih, but it's habr wahid. Now, if you have a sahih hadith and another sahih hadith, for example, which is mutawatir, which has come under with many chains, what are you going to do? You have one sahih hadith here and one sahih hadith here. Are you going to allow
Yeah.
the hadith with habr wahid to overtake the hadith which is from come through habr mutawatir? Right, so it's not just straightforward as though you find a hadith which is sahih in the book and then you're going to take that. It's like there are hadiths that you might class as sahih and other hadiths that are sahih, and one is abrogating another. It could be that
Abrogation,
they
yeah.
two hadiths contradict each other, and then the scholars, when they contradict each other, there's a whole science of hadith then. They contradict each other, and then they say, okay, well, which came first, which came later? Can we put a date stamp on this particular hadith? This is where this particular hadith was mentioned, because then what we can do
on
is
that point, Ustaz, what I'm gonna Imam Nawawi rahmatullah alayhi, in his fiqh compendium, he's got massive fiqh compendium called Al-Majmu' lil-Fatawa. It was his biggest book on fiqh. It's unknown to the layperson, but it's a very, very big.
Imam Nawawi, wasn't he a
volumes.
Shafi'i?
He was a Shafi'i, yes,
Okay.
that's
Despite
right.
being such a big scholar, he was a muqallid.
Yeah, exactly. So he was a big scholar. He was one of the greatest of all time, to be honest. To be fair, he's one of the greatest scholars of Islam.
He was a big timer, definitely.
So he says regarding this question, he answered this question. He said, Imam Shafi'i is reported to have said, if the hadith is sahih, fahuwa madhabi. If the hadith is sound, it is my madhab, my way of
my
ruling,
position,
my judgment, my position. He says, what a Shafi said does not mean that every time someone encounters an authentic hadith, he should say that this is the school of a Shafi. This is one of the scholars. And to be honest, there's not many people who understood the Shafi school and what Imam Shafi'i said better than Imam Nawawi, right?
He was mujtahid fil madhab.
Yes, exactly. It does not mean that this is the school of a Shafi and you should not follow the apparent meaning of it. No, this is restricted. This saying of Imam Shafi is restricted to those who have attained the level of ijtihad. What was Imam Abu Yusuf doing? What was Imam Muhammad doing? They had the hadith. Imam Abu Hanifa had the hadith. They are ijtihad. They might have disagreed. Right? They might have seen a different understanding. So basically it goes back to that principle. If you've got ijtihad and you see a different meaning to what the Imam saw, then you have every right to present your difference of opinion. This is restricted. This saying of Imam Shafi and Imam Abu Hanifa and others is restricted to those who level of ijtihad in the school, like you said, in the school of Shafi. So he knows how Imam Shafi works. I'm not sure it would be like this. It should be like this. What's happened here? And contingent on the preponderance that a Shafi might not have been aware of that hadith or its authenticity. What if Imam Shafi knew that hadith? What if he knew exactly what it meant and already explained why he's not taken that hadith? You can't just say, oh, he didn't know the hadith. No. Calm down. Wait. How do you know what Imam Shafi's understanding of the hadith was? He carries on. This is possible. You can do that.
Yeah.
This is possible only after reading all of Shafi'i's books and others who are drawn from him. This is a difficult condition and few are those who can meet it. This condition has been attached because Shafi'i has abandoned his own principles, acting according to the apparent meaning of many hadith. We already established it. You pull this out of nowhere. Somebody saying, why are you explaining Imam Shafi saying like that for? That what if there's a hadith that is different to what he said? Wait a minute. We already know he said things different to the apparent meanings of hadith. He's already explained several hadith in this way. We know he goes
that's his
against
principle.
the apparent. That's his principle for reasons, and he explained them. Read his books. We can't go through them. It's too difficult, too detailed, right? You just be here an hour on one masala to be here. But if you read the books, you'll find there's reasons he actually didn't take the hadith. So this is where we get the principle from, the fact that it actually happened, not we made it up. And this so he didn't act according to the apparent meaning of many hadith that he saw and knew. However, there was proof sufficient enough for him to criticize them, declare them abrogated, as you mentioned, restricted, interpreted, or a similar thing.
Yes.
Subhanallah. Stars, you're more or less quoting Imam Nawawi, by the way. I just thought I'd put Imam Nawawi's words.
Thank you very much.
Explained it exactly the same. So this is a scholarly tradition and how it works, dear listeners, viewers. It is not a game. It is not Quran and Sunnah, follow it. It sounds good. And by the way, this is one of our teachers with a beautiful saying for this. He said, those who say follow the Quran and Sunnah and abandon the schools of thought, the Imams and so forth, this is kalimatu. So he said, follow the Quran and Sunnah, follow the Quran and Sunnah. He
Yeah.
said, kalimatu haqqin urida bihil batil, a word
Yes.
of truth through which falsehood is promoted.
Yes. Yes.
Of
Definitely.
course, we all say follow the Quran and Sunnah, but do we say follow the Quran and Sunnah in a way that abandons the truth and promotes falsehood? No, 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 no. Right? Sayyidina Ali said this actually, I think, when he had his trouble. He said, kalimatu haqqin urida bihil batil. Yes.
Sheikh,
Word
you
of
know,
truth
here
in which falsehood was promoted. Yeah.
definitely, you know, like even people have heard of many great scholars of our own time, and a lot of people
Yeah.
know about the teacher of Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, yeah, Sheikh Murabat al-Hajj, yeah,
Murabit al-Hajj, yes.
Murabat al-Hajj, rahimahullah, and he basically talks about this issue of taqleed, etc. And he's not happy with regards to what he's saying. Yeah, he's saying basically, he goes, I'd leave it alone if people were just keeping this idea to themselves, that they want to go straight to the Quran and Sunnah themselves. And if it was a personal thing that somebody wanted to do, they're wrong in doing that, but chalo, this is their own masla, right? But when they are actively promoting this kind of ideology and telling people to abandon the madhabs and go and access the Quran and Sunnah directly, they are destroying people and destroying the iman. And he says basically, he calls them deviants. This is how he labels them. He says these are deviant individuals who are causing themselves, they are deviated, and they are causing others to deviate from the straight path. And Sheikh, you know, here the thing is that, you know, when they say, oh, we go to the Quran and Sunnah directly, really, do you do that? You know, you could tell me every single hadith regarding every aspect of the prayer. You could tell me every single hadith that you're using to base your wudu on and your ghusl on, and it's not practically possible, you know, for that. Look, mashallah, we've been studying for a number of years. Mashallah, you've been studying a lot longer than me. We are muqallids. Yeah, we are. When people come to us and ask questions, we're giving them the opinion of the school that we are following ourselves. Yeah, it's a practicality issue. That is someone gonna be able to follow the Quran and Sunnah directly? No, we are following the Quran and Sunnah. 100% we're following the Quran and Sunnah, and the proofs are there. Anybody who wants to look into the proofs, they are more than welcome. It's like when you were talking about the great scholars, you know, one of the key books that we have in the Hanafi madhab is Al-Hidayah. And Al-Hidayah's author, Imam Marginani, he was one of the Ashab al-Takhrij and also, Ashab al-Tarjih. And he was able to, you know, like, for example, you mentioned you have the founder of the school, meaning he's the founder of the principle. It's not like, oh, he just felt like doing this, so we just started following everything he felt like doing. No, he put the framework in place. Then we have the mujtahids in the school. Then you have mujtahid fil masail. So those people who remain within the principles of the school and derive rulings on that basis. Then you have the ashab al-takhrij, who those scholars who reach a level where they're able to investigate and look at the evidences. They do takhrij, or they are extrapolating what are the evidences in the Quranic verses and the hadiths that are in the background behind these rulings. Okay. Then you have the ashab al-tarjih, those scholars who look at a number of opinions within the school. And there was a question I was asked about, how do you pick an opinion within the Hanafi madhab, right? If there's 2 or 3 or 4 views within the Hanafi madhab, what do? You don't need to do anything. I don't need to do anything. That's all been done for us. Simple as that, really. It's everything has been done for us. What's been done? Everything is. You study your religion with a teacher, and your teacher will give you one ruling, and that is the ruling that you follow, because that is the ruling that the madhab is upon. Okay, so here you have the people like Imam Marginani, who are the ashab al-tarjih. They are qualified to go with one opinion over the other, and then that's all work has all been done. You don't need to look at 3 different opinions and which one should I choose. This is not like going to an ice cream van and saying, do I want an ice cream with the flake or without the flake, or do I want a cornetto? It's not like that. You just given one, you just take that. Yeah, Sheikh, you want to say something?
I just want to say, I didn't realize how time-wise it's flown, right? So it's such an important topic. I want to carry on,
flies when you're
but I
having
think
fun.
we need to wrap it up. Our viewers have been with us. May Allah bless them. Thank you for being with us. Please do subscribe to the channel. Please do ask questions, and I think we'll go to some of the questions, Ustadh. So if I pick up a few questions, then we finish
Yeah.
with your closing statement, and I'll make a closing statement, and then we'll finish tonight. So
ठीक है
next few
इंशाल्लाह.
minutes on questions. So guys, if you do have questions, please comment. The first one we'll pull up is this one, which says, Salam Sayyidi, Walaikum Salam. The biggest issue I have faced with the Madhab topic is how the Hanafi school is strict on not allowing one to apply rulings from the other schools unless there is a necessity. And then I think it continues. He says, I understand from research that the other three schools were and are much more relaxed with allowing rulings from other schools to take effect. This causes confusion with those who don't like the schools. Yes. So, Ustaz, maybe you want to address that a little bit, inshallah.
Yeah, you see, thing here, the whole when we follow a school, this is to control. This is about discipline. It's about controlling our
Discipline.
desires. One I don't like this and I don't like that. Like ni gali ni. When Allah and His Messenger have
No.
commanded something, and when they've said something is how it is, then there's no issue of liking or not liking or having our own feelings, right? So I'm 35 years old. I've always been a Hanafi. I don't see any problem. I've never needed to go to another madhab for anything else, right? You have your set of rules. We have our rulings and teachings, and there's no need to go elsewhere. And if there is, you see what the Hanafis do. Why the Hanafis strict? Because they want to keep people. You know, you have people. You give them an inch, they take a mile. Yeah, you give them place to stand, they sit. You give them place to sit, they lay down. Yeah, or lay down for latan clearly kinen, right? So what the Hanafis do is they keep people. They say, right, you follow the madhab. This is not about picking and choosing. We're not shopping here. We're not just going to pick and choose whichever one we like or which we don't like. The thing is about following different madhabs is if you're following one madhab, you're following the methodology of that one madhab. When you start picking and choosing with different madhabs, then you're chopping and changing between different methodologies. It's like, for example, we're in Bradford and you want to go to London. You can either go down the M1 or you can go down the A1. Whichever route you want to take, you take. But you once you're on one route, you follow that route. You can't say I want to go, M1 and then A1 and then M1 and A1 again and chopping and changing. You're on a route. It's going to take you to your destination. That's where you need to go. So if a person wants to follow the Maliki school, then go to the Maliki school and follow the Maliki school, but then learn the Maliki school and follow that entirely, right? There are certain exceptions where if somebody has an issue, they go to a mufti, and the mufti, for example, Hanafi mufti, and say, what's the ruling for me regarding this issue? And the Hanafi mufti says, this is the ruling. The person presents his problems and situation, circumstances, etc. And then the Hanafi mufti contacts a Shafi mufti or a Maliki mufti and says, look, what's your view what's your ruling in your madhab regarding this particular issue? And then there is some potential for that mufti to give the person a ruling. But this is not you giving yourself a ruling or you choosing something yourself. This is you being given it by a mufti who's going to ensure that you're not just following your desires and your caprice. Otherwise, Satya na soi jaisi.
No, Ustaz, I agree with you on that. So from my experience, and thank you to Sid Ibrahim for the question, Ibrahim Ghani Saab. And yes, I think that maybe from his experience, he's speaking, because from my experience, because I studied in Syria, the ulama of Syria are predominantly Hanafi as well. Okay, the Ottoman Empire is Hanafi, and it was Turkey, Syria. They were heavily influenced. There's Shafi'is, Hanbalis, Malikis there as well, but majority, I'd say, are Hanafi as well. And they're not as strict and stringent. Like you said there, Ustaz, you'll go to the Mufti, he may follow the Hanafi madhab, but he will have mixed with the other madhabs. He knows scholars from the schools. He's been told fatwa. So he knows that if somebody comes to a particular situation, difficulty, he's not making his own rulings up. He's not thinking, this, I'm going to change and chop. What he's saying to that individual is, there's a Shafi scholar there. That opinion actually will benefit. So it's not, his discipline is there. This individual coming is not going around saying, who's going to give me the fatwa? He's go to the one teacher he trusts, the one scholar he trusts, and he himself has the open-mindedness to think, right, we don't have to follow one school. You don't. This is an important point.
Yeah.
And yes, where some people are from, they don't mix with the schools. They are just being there in certain parts of the world where they're just constantly learning one school of thought, which is not wrong, by the way.
Yeah.
It's not wrong just to know one school and just to follow that school. I'll give you another example of that. Which qira'at do you read of the Quran, Ustaz? Which riwayah do you read of the Quran? Hafs, you read the Hafs from Imam Asim, this Hafs and Asim ibn Abi Najud, right? Why do you read Warsh, Ustaz? Why do you only follow one? Please, you need to follow two now.
This is it. It's not taught. It's not.
Why don't you follow two? Why do you only follow one recitation of the Quran? Isn't the other one from Allah and His Messenger as well?
It certainly is.
So why don't you read
Yeah.
it? Why are you neglecting it for? You see, it's not a fair statement, is it?
No, it's not.
How long did it take you to learn the one recitation of the Quran?
Subhanallah,
A
definitely.
lifetime or several
Yeah,
years. It takes
yeah, yeah,
many
of course,
years
of
from
course.
childhood and to be proficient. Now you were
Yes,
to go back and learn another. You don't have to, but if you
yes,
were, then okay, it take a long time. So let's
yeah,
be practical. If you've learned one way of doing something and that's what's around you, you don't have to learn another way of doing it. You're not obligated to. It's not recommended even necessarily.
yeah,
If you can and you have the ability, and mashallah, some people do. Some scholars know many more than one madhab, one school of
yeah,
thought. They can combine. They're very clever, mashallah, very intelligent people. I'm not saying there's nobody can do that, but
yeah,
for the layperson, you're going to go to the mufti, and what you'll find is if they've only ever learned one school of thought, and but personally, I've only learned one school of thought, the Hanafi school.
mm,
We've done comparative fiqh, so we've seen some of the other schools and how they
yeah,
operate. And but we've got to remember there's lots of principles, there's lots of rules, there's lots of details, and you can't just say it says this in a book and
yeah,
this is there's rules of fatwa, there's etiquettes and methodology of fatwa and so forth. It's very it's not something that is a day job for someone. It's a serious discipline. So for that reason, this is why you'll find some areas where certain people don't interact with other schools of thought, that they're pretty rigid, let's say, or staunch in their ways. Whereas you go to Syria, you go to places where there is a multicultural, madhab school of thought
yeah,
kind of environment. Egypt being another example, they've
yeah,
got all four schools there, Al
yeah.
Azhar Sharif, and you'll find they don't have any issue with each other. They're very accommodating, but the scholars are very, very clear that this is Hanafi madhab, Shafi madhab, and they stick within the qualified scholarship, but they do it properly. So this is, I think, just based on maybe the different parts of the world and how scholars interact with other scholars and mix. They
Indo-Pak will
build
be
a kind
straight
of,
up. The Indo-Pak scholars are very
yeah,
strict. They
very
promote
strict, yeah.
just very strict sticking to your mazhab. That's it, because they know that
Mhm.
Pakistani log jitne zyada hai, wo thode mast hone hain. So we
Yeah.
start giving them rulings from different mazhabs, and they'll pura satyanas kari shursan. So that's
So
why they
stars,
keep
just get
it.
another question here.
Yeah.
So his question here says, what if this haram taqleed you have just explained, which we did at the beginning, is the
Mm.
only string of an individual's faith? That's all he's got. He's following blindly in faith. Is in of itself. The question is there iman accepted? So they believe that. So obviously, if you follows Christianity, that's not accepted.
Yeah.
But a Muslim who has no other way of believing and has never thought for himself, follows another Muslim and actually believes in the correct stuff. What's the ruling of that? You said that's not allowed. First of all, is that correct to do that? Second of all, what's the ruling on that person's iman?
See, the scholars have said that if a person, let's say, the example here would be someone's born into Islam, right? So their
Yeah.
family is already believers and they're born into Islam, and they're just following the religion of their forefathers. Yeah, that would be permissible, because their forefathers are following and believing in something that is correct. Yeah, and because their parents are believing in what is correct, the children, even though they might not know the details of their belief and the faith, they are fine to believe in that. The problem is when they are not correct and their beliefs are baseless, then that is where the problem is, and that would be
Old
haram,
wives'
basically.
tales, superstitions,
Bilkul,
these
right? Because
practices.
just to mention here
It's
that
damaging, isn't it?
so is a person born into Islam required to learn all the tenets of faith before they could be classed as a Muslim? No, they could be born into Islam
No.
and they will be classed as being a Muslim.
Of course.
In Bukhari Sharif, there's a hadith Mubarak, and I will just get right to the point, that when a non-believer in the grave is questioned by Munkar and Nakir, and it is said to him, what did you used to say regarding this person, referring to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will say, La adri, I don't know. Or he will say, I was just saying what the people used to say. Right? I was just saying what the people used to say. So whatever people used to say, I say the same thing. And then they say to him, you didn't use your intellect and you didn't read the Quran. Yeah, you didn't use your intellect and you didn't read the Quran. So for the non-believer, they didn't use the intellect to work out that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exists and is a creator, and they didn't read the Quran to find out this information either. So to answer the question directly, which I have done, saying that if an individual's only access to faith is by blindly following their parents, and their parents are believers on Islam, then that would be sufficient for that person's iman.
Yeah. And just to add to that, Ustaz, I think some scholars have, in terms of the faith, So if you
Yes.
follow the faith without reasoning, there is a level of blemish in that, because
Yes.
you
Oh
have a
yes.
duty to
Yes.
learn.
You
Yeah.
do.
So
You do.
it's not just like you're okay. There is
Yeah.
a level of accountability and blemish in not learning for yourself. But to answer the question, the faith of the person,
Will it
if what they
count?
believe
It
is
will.
correct,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
counts. Yes, it is. We can't classify somebody non-Muslim
Yeah. But
who
remember,
believes
we
in
said we
Islam,
don't do
even if that
taqleed
is,
we don't do
yeah,
taqleed in aqaid. Therefore, everyone should
yeah,
learn at least to like
should
aqidah
learn their own
tahawiyah
akida.
level.
This is important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
And
level.
when you say Akida Tahawi, you don't include Imam Tahawi. He quotes Quran and Sunnah. So you're
Oh
saying
yeah, yeah,
we
hundred
believe in
percent.
the resurrection. That's in the Quran. So he'll quote. If you look at the commentaries of Akida Tahawi, all they are Quran
Yeah.
Hadith, Quran Hadith,
Yes.
Quran Hadith. Because what
100%.
Imam Tahawi's wording for you is the beliefs in the Quran and the Sunnah. So that's why it's a very
Which are
accepted
also
text
the exact
universally
same beliefs of
amongst
Imam
the
Abu
Muslims.
Hanifa. That's what he was
Yes, exactly. It's very,
classifying and
yeah.
bringing
He
together.
quotes it. He says, this is هذا بيان عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة هذا مذهب فقهاء الملة أبي
Subhanallah.
حنيفة النعمان بن ثابت
Sabit.
الكوفي وأبي إبراهيم يوسف بن يعقوب الأنصاري وأبو الحسن محمد بن أبو عبد الله محمد بن حسن الشيباني وما يعتقدون من أصول الدين ويدينون به لرب العالمين نقول
Subhanallah.
بتوفيق الله إن الله سبحانه وتعالى واحد لا شريك له. إن mentions the Aqidah,
MashaAllah,
right?
Shaykh.
So this is
Allahumma zid
all
fazid.
this is the Aqidah of Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and it's the Aqidah of Imam Tahawi, Imam Abu Yusuf, Imam Abu Hanifa, and all the other Imams.
Ji,
And he
of
just
course.
mentioned them in particular to tell
Yeah.
you that this is the in tradition back to the Prophet ﷺ, which is the Quran and Sunnah. So it says here, just a comment I'm sharing, because I hold up a bottle in the middle of the room and ask everyone in the room to draw a picture of the bottle as they can see it. In the end, everyone has drawn the same bottle, but from their perspective. The image everyone draws will be according to the view they had of the bottle. This is an analogy I came across a few years ago. Jazakallah Sidi Saif for sharing. So just one here, maybe I think you shouldn't hide from these questions, so let's mention it.
Yeah,
Says the
yeah.
Madhab practice come up a lot when finding Rishte Ustaz. The
Yeah,
Rood
ठीक है.
Khatam Maulid questions crops up and is a deal breaker. Should a Barelvi Deobandi change so that they can marry someone from a different school? I think this is very particular, but I think it's a question we can address, inshallah, as you see best. Ustaz, over to you.
Sheikh, the thing here is compatibility in marriage is key.
Yes.
And I always say that a person should marry somebody from the same madhab and from the same maslak. When we say madhab,
Maslak,
we
yeah.
basically say, for example, if somebody was a Hanafi, married a Shafi or a Maliki or a Hanbali, that's fine. But again, practicality wise, they're not going to most likely, if you get someone from the same background, culture, they're going to be most likely the same madhab. With regards to
Madhab as well.
Mawlid and such things, should Mawlid be a deal breaker? It's not really the Mawlid, it's the actual sector the person's from. Mawlid is like, what people think Mawlid is the kind of main thing. But this is like a sign or a
Yeah.
symbol of the people of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So if, for example, there was a sister and she said, I celebrate Mawlid, and there's a brother who's interested in marrying me and he is against Mawlid, should I marry him? I said, no, you shouldn't, because there's no compatibility here. Because why is he against the Mawlid? Because he is not from the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. And if he's not from the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, then there's no compatibility, because you're going to be
When you
doing
have
Eid on.
children,
Yeah.
and you want to do Maulid with your son and daughter,
Yes.
what is the husband going to do? He's going to say bid'ah, shirk, and
Yeah.
stop
He's
it.
going to
What's
be
going to
doing
happen
Eid
then?
with Saudis on one day. You're going to be doing Eid on the next day. He's going to,
Exactly.
your Khatam Sharifs are going to be, even though everything
Banned.
that we are doing so as long as the person is under the umbrella of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, that is the main and more important. Look, you can't marry someone who calls you, who thinks you're a bid'ati. You can't marry someone who thinks you're a mushrik, or someone who thinks you're
Yeah, exactly.
the wrong
There's going
aqidah.
to be a lot of conflict in such a
Sheikh, honestly,
communication. And Ustaz, just to mention this to the viewers, the person may say, I'll accommodate it, we can work it out. Because, sometimes the emotion gets the better of people, the attraction and so forth. But this is very dangerous, because at that point, your emotions and your feelings are talking. Tomorrow, when all the honeymoon and all these emotions, all the lovey-dovey stuff is finished, it's going to be to the point, it's going to be whack, whack, whack. And the person's going to show their true colors, because that is who he or she is. You can hide it for a month or two or a year, but in reality, when it comes to the crux of the matter, you're going to say, no, I don't believe that. I don't want you to do that. Wait to stop. And guess what? All hell breaks loose.
Definitely.
My marriage is, and I know couples like this, unfortunately. So
Sheikh,
I agree with you, Stars.
here,
I think
100%.
we should always try and find compatibility. Go ahead.
Just one point here is, when you marry someone from a different sect, then there's either two things: conflict or compromise. and neither is good. Conflict is not good, like you've just explained, and compromise is not good. Why should you compromise and move away from the way of the Ahl Sunnah wal Jama'ah and the way of the people of the Sunnah and the congregation and the
because if you're not going to
mainstream
conflict, you
Orthodox
compromise.
Sunni Muslims? Yeah. So there's conflict and compromise. Stay away from both. Don't compromise your Aqidah. Don't compromise your beliefs. Don't compromise the established Sunnah practices, and also don't engage in conflict either. So compatibility is key and important, and therefore,
So
someone has asked me to read a nikah for them in a couple of weeks' time, and I know the sister because I teach her, and I said, the guy you're getting married to, is he from the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah? He said, yeah. I said, that's fine. I'll do the nikah then, because if he's not from the Ahl Sunnati, I'm not even going to do the nikah, because I wouldn't want to put anybody in that situation.
Okay, so another question here says, Sheikh, what if I live in Iran? Would we become Shia? Do we consider them wrong or right? I'll put a quick answer and I'll to stars. If you live in Iran, you don't become a Shia. It doesn't matter where you live on the earth or on the Mars or the moon or the Pluto. It doesn't matter where you live. I have friends from Iran who are Sunni. I think about 20-25% of Iran is actually Sunni. It's not 100% Shia. So it doesn't matter if where you live, doesn't make you Sunni or Shia. Do we consider them right or wrong? We consider them wrong quite fundamentally on certain aspects. But when we're talking about differences and we consider them wrong, we're not saying we hate them, we conflict with them, we disparage them, and so forth. We just have differences and we can't deny them. So we are clear that we have differences. And my difference means I believe a Christian is wrong. I believe a Jew is wrong. I believe the Shias are wrong. But I don't hate Jews, hate Christians, hate Shias, hate all these people. I can live with them. We've got to learn to tolerate the differences. So there's differences. I believe they're wrong, but I can tolerate them. Ustaz, what's your response?
Sheikh, same what you just said there. There's another question that just come up on the screen, which is caught my eye, which I'd like us just to answer. Is Salafism regarded as outside of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah? Then yes,
Bismillah, go ahead.
they are the Salafism and the Salafis, or the Wahhabis, they called as well. They are not part of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. The careful thing you have to be here is that they are now calling themselves the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, open bracket, Salafism, close bracket. Yeah, this is how they are now portraying themselves, which is why we have to work harder to educate our people that the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah is the title is being hijacked now, right? Because that's what they're finding. They're going to be the saved sect. So basically, are the Salafis within the Ahl Sunnah? Absolutely no, they're not. And
so
what are they doing?
Just to finish with this final question, Ustaz, you can carry on with the comment. Just include this, I suppose. Sheikh, isn't the hadith that the Muslims are split into a number of sects and only one sect is correct? That is a scary situation to be in. If you just want to add that to your response about the Salafis.
Here the Prophet ﷺ has mentioned that they will be split into a number of sects, and the sect which is the saved sect is the sect of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah, the people of the Sunnah and the congregation, and that is the main Orthodox Sunni Muslim, which is the majority of the Muslims around the world. Shias are only like 9 or 10% of the overall Muslim population, right? Salafis and they are only very, very small pocket minority, very small minority, but they're very active on dawah, very active on social media. They speak with passion and all of these kind of things, and they are hijacking this Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah title. When it comes to the four schools, and I just want to finish this point here, is the four schools that we have: the Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi, Hanbali. We may differ in the way we pray. We may differ with regards to certain rulings, furu'i masail, right? So the kind of things that to do with prayer and worship, etc. But when it comes to Aqidah, we are absolutely the same. There is one sect with regards to the Aqidah, and that is the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Then you'll hear names like Maturidi and Ash'ari. They are two schools of theology which have minute differences between themselves, so minute that they do not consider themselves to be two separate sects. There is one sect under the umbrella. So what the Salafi is doing at the moment, they're saying that the Ash'ariya and the Maturidiyya, which are us basically, the main most Muslims around the world, and then they're saying, these people are deviants. So don't take from them, don't listen to them. They would discourage you from listening to our discourses, etc. And so that they're able to isolate you from mainstream Islam, like a sheep is isolated by a wolf from the pack of sheep. Yes, you have the sheep in their pack, and then the wolf comes and kind of separates one from the other so he can attack him and get him. This is what they do. But the thing is, we have to stick with the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah and the mainstream Sunnis, which is the Ahl
Jazakallah khair,
Sunnati wal
Ustaz.
Jama'ah.
Any final comments you have for our viewers today?
Sheikh, the final comment is this, that people talk about blind following and all of these things. A lot of people have heard, I did a few surveys online, people saying we've heard of blind following. It's a common thing that people hear. Blind following is a necessity for individuals who do not have the ability to access the Quran and Sunnah directly. Are we following the Quran and Sunnah? Absolutely. We're just following it through the understanding that has been passed on, and frameworks that have been put in place by the great Imams. We are absolutely following. The evidences are there. We have Quran evidences, we have Hadith evidences. We are absolutely following the Quran and Sunnah. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. And the only thing I would say here is that we, as me, myself, and yourselves, we need to actively learn our deen. Yeah, because this is not something that it just grows naturally. You have to work hard at this. And the very last point I want to mention is this, that, you know, I have this kind of approach where we just get on with our learning and teaching, and we don't interfere with anybody. Hum kisi ko chhedte nahi. As we would say, you know, in Urdu, right? We don't interfere, we don't mess up, you know, we don't even like mentioning the names, we don't like to mention like Salafis and Wahhabis. But when there's such a toxic pollution being spread, then it kind of comes down to something where we say, you know, hum kisi ko chhedte nahi, agar hame koi chhere to hum usko chhodte nahi. Right? So then we have to kind of follow this rule of that, look, we're not going to mess about with anybody, but if someone's going to keep, you know, having digs at us, then we're going to explain clearly what the beliefs are, explain clearly what the correct practices are, and with the dalail from the Quran and Sunnah. And may Allah Almighty allow us to stick hold fast to the Quran and Sunnah and the scholars of the Ahl Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Jazakallahu khairan.
Jazakallah khairan. I've just got 3 points, dear
Yes,
listeners.
please.
Thank you, first of all, for being with us and hanging about. Stars for his time today. It's almost up 2 hours, our longest podcast so far. We do have I think we might be doing a fortnightly podcast with Stars.
Inshallah, that'd be good. I think
Inshallah,
the next one we will kind of discuss. A lot of people want to talk about marriage.
Marriage and stuff. So send in your suggestions. The email's there on the screen, deenalfitra1@gmail.com. You can get us through Instagram, and, you know, he follows on our Facebook, sending messages and stuff like that. So please get involved, please subscribe to the channel, please, you know, send us your suggestions, your questions. We hope we could answer as well. Second point is based on what Ustaz was saying regarding the sects and so forth. One point to mention though is what we don't believe regarding the sects of Islam is they are kafir. Okay, there's heretics and zanadiqa and blasphemy that takes a person outside of Islam. That's not part of the Muslim body. Okay,
like the Qadianis, for example.
Yeah, like Qadianis, Ahmadiyya, these groups that have taken certain beliefs, Baha'is and some Ismailis, and there's certain beliefs within certain sects. Within the Nusayris, they believe, Ali was God incarnate. They've gone into sort of very blasphemous beliefs. If you haven't gone to a blasphemous belief, but you're going to a misguided belief, then that's the 73 sects. That's those that will have their own purification process, whether that's through punishment, forgiveness of Allah, their own reckoning. They haven't made the correct decisions in this life regards. So there could be sin in beliefs. There can be sin in actions, okay? There can be sin in morals, right? So there's various forms of getting it right and wrong. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to say. And finally, guys, I wanted to say and reiterate the topic today, like Ustaz did as well. We follow the Quran and Sunnah. Today's topic was not about following Imams and abandoning the Quran and Sunnah, and this Imams are, the be-all end-all of Islam. No, they fulfill the purpose. Allah reward them. Allah honor them. What we've seen from the tradition is that they are respected, are honored before the service to the Quran and Sunnah, the service to the Muslims. And Allah decided in His wisdom to allow the majority of this whole ummah, the 1.7 billion odd Muslims that we are, majority of them, like Ustaz says, follow. Even the Shias actually follow schools of thought, the Ja'fari school and so forth. So they follow a methodology to understand the Quran and Sunnah, and we hope that we can respect that, follow that. I just got a question right now, emailed in from a brother asking about zakat. What is he going to do? Look, he says, my wife has zakatable wealth only in gold and silver, and she hasn't got any cash or savings. How is she going to pay her zakat? She hasn't got no money to pay zakat. She hasn't got gold and silver, and she has to pay zakat on it. How does she do that? we'll answer that in a future video as well, maybe a video on zakat or something.
Yeah.
But thank you all for being a part of today. We hope you benefited from today. It's been long, but thank you for keeping with us and staying tuned in. See you inshallah for a future podcast. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.